So,
Okay.
I personally had not heard of the code of conduct panel until July. When everything started going down. I believe that was July, and I can't help but think there must be a lot of people in our audience that are kind of like me that really don't know actually much about your work. So, I really would like you to take a moment, maybe to express, at least in some brevity, to us people, what exactly the code of conduct panel is. Why is it that we are, trusting you guys? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people doing this kind of thing, but what are the qualifications that make the code of conduct panel, worthy of making these decisions or judgments, or actually what decisions and judgments are you making, because I'm not quite sure about that either, and I'm sure a lot of people don't really know about it. But what separates you from just a group of random Smash players saying, we're going to pass judgment on what goes on in the community? Tell us about that.
Right. So, a basic history will help you understand. Um, a few years ago, there was an attempt to organize the Smash community around a universal rule set. So instead of some tournaments allowing wobbling and some not, there was an effort that everybody gets on the same page and decides, okay, wobbling or okay, Pokemon Stadium frozen or not, whatever. To that end, there was a group of 25 tournament organizers that all came together and tried to make these decisions for the nation. Obviously, there are way more than 25 tournament organizers, but those were like the biggest in their respective regions. Of those 25, we have at least 5 that are super nationals, which are like the biggest 1,000 people, 2,000 people events of the year, and they're called the 5. So within the 25 people, the only woman brought up the fact that we should probably talk about harassment and safety if we're going to be making things like universal rule sets. And pretty much all the TOs there were like, well, I don't think actually that we're qualified to do that. So why don't you make some kind of task force, towards that end? The harassment task force was born. There were nine of us selected. I was selected because I am in a PhD program, so I have access to peer-reviewed research that could be used to inform the policies, and because I'd been a vocal advocate throughout my entire time in the scene for women and anti-sexism, all that kind of stuff. So this group already had the tacit endorsement, or at least the go-ahead from 25 and the 5 to try to find some kind of solution to this harassment problem. If you look on Smashboards, if you Google Smashboards harassment task force, you can see some of the first posts that went out about what we were trying to do and who was signing on, all that kind of stuff. From there, so the harassment task force, the 9 of us basically wrote a code of conduct, right? Like researched what other scenes do, researched our legal limitations, more or less, all those sorts of things, and finally decided, okay, this is what our rules are going to be, and now we have to go and implement them. So moving from like that theoretical, like, okay, we think anyone who has sex with a minor should be banned, into, okay, let's actually ban anyone that has sex with a minor. That's where we did the name change from harassment task force to code of conduct panel, because the panel actually okay, so I'll explain what the panel does. So if we have this list of rules, there are people that break the rules. That's just how it is. So what the code of conduct panel is supposed to do is we have a report form that is set up for people to submit complaints about something that has occurred, misconduct. We've got a pretty thorough list of, is it online harassment? Is it stalking? Is it physical abuse? Is it whatever? And when we receive those reports, ideally, we will get together a panel of people to interview the person who filed a report, interview the person who was accused of a misconduct, interview anybody else, review any other evidence, and come to a decision together about, okay, should we advise a ban to our tournament signatories? Should we recommend that this person take time off? Or is this person safe to be in our community again? Will they do it again if we just give them a slap on the wrist 2-month ban kind of thing? So that's what our function is supposed to be. In practice, we have far more reports than we have the resources to address. But theoretically, we would advise bans for people that have done something that we've pretty much all agreed is bad. I guess that's the simplest way to boil it down. My specific involvement, I was there when it was formed. I did a lot of the research and writing, and then I'm one of 2 people that survived the transition from the theoretical to the practical. So I've been running all the emails, the Twitter, organizing cases, interviewing panelists, that sort of thing. And more recently, as we discussed a bit earlier, my role has also become sort of the public figurehead. So if somebody wants to appraise or attack the code of conduct, I am usually the first person on that list.
Well, thank you for your efforts, especially dealing with the latter mentioned topic there. Absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned some of the issues that you run into. So there's a lot of cases, probably more than the panel is really capable of handling right now. Taking a step back, let's say that you had an ideal world where the Code of Conduct Committee could be as powerful or as well funded or as well resourced as you wanted it to be. How do you picture its role in the community? And, more importantly, what might the community look like when the Code of Conduct's overall mission is complete, if you will?
So if I'm picturing this ideal world, then that means that most of tournament organizers have signed on or enforce or take our ban advice, more or less. Which means that every new person that enters a new tournament anywhere across the United States is gonna know or be familiar with or enter a culture in which we've all established that it's not okay to date minors, it's not okay to stalk people, et cetera, et cetera. So first of all, that sounds like a much better experience for the person who's just walking in for the first time and trying to get to know people, right? It's also a better experience for the parents who are nervous about their kids, their 14-year-old traveling a state away to go to a tournament, right? Like, if these parents see and know that there is a code of conduct that is enforced, that inspires a lot more faith in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So besides just like the culture would be different. Another thing I can think of is that well, okay, it's kind of complex. So when people behave well, when people treat each other well, when they're welcoming and friendly and create bonds that really last, there are many different aspects that contribute to that, right? There's, how good or bad is one individual person or the worst. Then there are cultural aspects, like is it generally acceptable to rage at your opponent when you lose? Those sorts of things. But unfortunately, the code of conduct is sort of limited to the fact that we react to misconduct, right? Even though we could create a cultural shift away from misconduct because suddenly there would be consequences for being caught and reported, right? We still couldn't prevent any bad egg from entering and doing any kind of harm.
Right.
But it would discourage people from harm, and if everyone knew the kinds of things that we all agreed on as a community are bad, then they're less likely to stumble into it, or they're less likely to take the risk of like getting super drunk at somebody's house they don't know, or there are things that would change if everybody agreed about what should or shouldn't be okay in Smash. Well, I've been breathing fire.